and welcome back, Doodle crewmates, to another Doodle Crew artist interview. Yay, yay, welcome. I am super excited to be sitting down today with Vic. Thanks for joining me, Vic.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this one is kind of fun. I'm excited about it because the first question that I've been asking everybody is, how did we meet? Which I think is kind of funny in our case.
Yeah, we met on Twitter because I had been working in an artist vacuum for a year and wanted someone that wasn't like a child to talk to about comics and stuff. And in my tweeting outwards, a mutual friend, Mike Ellison, it is Ellison, isn't it?
Yes.
Tagged Emily in it. So here we are.
Which is awesome. It's one of the first times I've ever had a connection kind of be made like that on Twitter. Like, I've reached out to artists and had back and forth, but this was one where it was, oh, this is actually a person that Mike knows and he knows me. And then we got chatting and we had very similar experiences, and yeah. It was awesome. So
Mike
I'm
was
so
like
happy.
Bringing people together on the internet.
Which is very cool. And it's a very cool part about the internet, and something especially nice coming off of this past year with the pandemic and everything. So
yeah, it's always good to meet new people.
Absolutely. So I have another kind of funny question that I've been asking everybody, because there is a predominant factor that runs through a lot of the Doodle Crew artists, and that is if you went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, which
I did not. No, no Art Institute of any kind for me.
No.
I studied in England, down in Cornwall, actually. So like almost not even a proper university, but like in like local colleges, like real out there rural education.
So was making art always going to be something for you? I like to ask, how long have you been making art, and was that going to be your future prospects that you thought when you were younger?
On and off, yes. I could talk at length about this one. So I've always been making art. Like, I was just an arty kid, like scribbling on paper and then making a lot of comics and arts sort of pieces as a kid, like scribbly doodles and stuff always. And I really like cartoons and things. And it seems to be, I don't know if it was that I liked cartoons, that's why I started drawing, and now that's all I can draw, or if I liked cartoons because it was all I could draw to begin with. Who knows? But cartoons is where it's at for me. And for a minute, I was like gearing myself up to, before I knew what I wanted to do with my life, before people like asked me questions like that when I was just like early teens, I was like, I'm just going to do art. And it was just kind of expected that I was going to do art all the way through my educational career, at least. And then, so in England, you have to choose at 14 years old, you choose some specialist subjects that you get like a secondary school level qualification in. And at the time, in the UK, school was only mandatory until you were 16 for me. Oh. So basically you study like just whatever basic subjects, like everything. You study bits of everything all the way up to 14. And then for 2 years you specialize, and you will drop some subjects and then specialize in some others. And you still have to do stuff like maths, English, science, and PE and things like that. But it meant that I had the option then to focus on studying art at the expense of other things, for example, like geography.
Yeah.
So I signed up for art, and I had a terrible art teacher who told me verbatim, cartoons are not art. And she just kept trying to make me paint still life and was like, try harder, you're not applying yourself. And I'm like, dude, everything I draw looks like a cartoon. I can't help it. That's what happens. I'm trying. It's not that I'm not trying. But she was incredibly unsupportive of, like there's the kind of teachers who try and grab kids and help elevate what they are naturally good at, versus teachers who try and funnel kids into being a specific thing. Unfortunately, she was that kind of teacher, I guess. Like, she knew her stuff when it came to fine art and art history and painting techniques, but she didn't have a single word to say about cartoons. And in terms of, it was a specialist science school as well to boot. So there was no like career track for art in that school by any means. So I got 3 or 4 classes into that course, and I was like, this is terrible. And I went to, my mum helped me, and we went to the school sort of administrators and everything and swapped it around. And I stopped studying art, like flat out. I dropped art and I studied computers instead. So I haven't studied art since I was 14. And so I went on to, I kind of kept doodling things in the background for a while because I never really could stop. Like I just had a personal interest in it, but I got really angry at it because I kept trying to draw something that I just couldn't do because she made me feel like it wasn't real art if it was cartoons. And so like I gave up art for a long time, for many years in an official capacity. And then I ended up going back into education after a little break, and I studied filmmaking instead. And in the course of doing filmmaking, I ended up doing animation stuff, but that was because I was choosing to do animation in a filmmaking course and not because it was required. So I kind of kept doing art, but it's really only been since I had a web comic back in 2007 for a few years as a kind of like on and off thing, and then I took a break from that. But I've only really like seriously got back into art in the last 6 or so years. So it's been very on and off.
Yeah,
it's always.
It's so heartbreaking to me. And obviously I am an art educator as well, and I'm in a specialty thing. So I have the option to literally encourage kids to go into cartooning specifically because it's what I teach. But it breaks my heart when teachers approach art like that. And while I think there are fundamentals that are absolutely important, sure, but I would so much rather see that teacher be like, okay, so here, let's take a look at Picasso, because early on in Picasso's career, he was drawing hyper-realistic things. Yeah. Here's how he evolved in his career into something else. So there are ways and there are places like, okay, so if you're getting inspired and still lifes don't inspire you, then let's find something else. Let's look at pop art. Yeah. Let's look at something like, to just squish somebody from not, continuing to do it just breaks my heart.
We did study like art history and we covered those periods. We covered pop art. We looked at Picasso, all the kind of major ones. It's just that, our studying of that was exclusively limited to like, okay, we're studying this thing. So everybody get out your textbooks, read about this, make a collage, and then draw a version of that kind of style of art. And then we moved on to the next style. Yeah. And there was no room then when it came to, all right, now draw this pot plant or draw this person who's going to sit on a chair for an hour. There was no room whatsoever in that space for anything else. It was all just like, okay, now we're going to paint fruit. Now we're going to paint a shoe. Now we're going to look at landscapes. There was no delving into finding what individual art skills or preferences anybody had. Nobody wanted to hear it. And the complete dismissal of anything close to a cartoon as being quite literally just not art, like it didn't count. So I just felt like a fraud my whole life. And it's taken so many years of like reprogramming it in my head to be like, no, she was wrong. Like, I know she was trying to teach a thing I wasn't interested in, and it was just unfortunate that I was in that class and she was the wrong teacher for me. But the statement that cartoons are not art is wrong.
Yes, and that is factually incorrect.
Yeah.
And it is such a stripped down version of teaching art. Like, I feel like you removed all of the vitality and the life from art to teach it in that way. Like, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm retroactively very annoyed at this teacher for handling it like that. And that's just.
Yeah, same. It kind of, the haunting words will resonate with me for years to come, I'm sure. But as a result of that, I'm like super like, no, cartoons are art and you draw what you want to draw to everyone I meet, even if they don't ask. Stop people on the street. You there.
Cartoons are art. They're like, okay. And I'm like, you're right. Yeah. So when it comes to cartoons being art and all of that, as you are right now as an adult, is art your primary career or your job?
It is not. It was very briefly. And then a global pandemic happened aside from a lot of other things. So for a minute, I was doing illustrations, a lot of just private commissions for people who wanted specific things drawn, a few small business logos, stuff like that, and then selling art prints and badges and stuff like that at conventions or in my online store and stuff like that. But then I came to America and there was a pandemic, and it's a whole world change now. So I am no longer doing that full time, but maybe someday.
Yes. And I think that's something really beautiful about the way that art can adapt and change. And I know for a long time in my art career, comics and going to Comic-Con and illustration and selling things on Etsy were always secondary because I had a full-time job. And while I was still doing art at the job, it was not the art that I wanted to be doing. It was a lot of very like corporate logo stuff, which was fine. And I needed that steady income for a bit. But it got to a point then where I was so much more looking forward to the art I was doing at home that I wanted to then figure out, I was like, okay, how can I actually do this? How can I like reasonably do this without going into, massive debt or living on the street?
That sounds familiar. I've definitely spent lunch breaks drawing comics and like in between things drawing comics and wherever possible find an excuse to do art and comics or something as part of my job.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got pretty well known in one of my jobs when I was working on a comic book a few years ago for like the lunch bell would toll and I just straight out with my paper and my markers and stuff and like carrying on with the comic. And then like lunch hour's over, put it back and I'm back to my job.
Yep. Yeah, I think as we talked about it, even though you had those setbacks and had doubt in yourself about it, I think it's still always there and it finds a way. Like it finds a way to get back and be like, hey, I'm still here. And you're like, you are. And I still really want to do this.
It went away. It could never go away.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads into the next one when it comes to, you've talked about having a webcomic. I know you've talked about, again, getting to create web comics and actual print comics art. So how did you, again, recovering from terrible, stupid teacher who will not be named, like how did you get into accepting that niche of cartoons that you were in and feeling comfy there?
I'd say that's almost still a work in progress even now. I wouldn't necessarily say that I found a niche. I don't feel like I found a niche in any case. I think, if anything, I'm very guilty of having too many very different plans and projects going on that sort of steal attention from each other. Like my convention table looks like a mess because it's just like, oh, do you like bookmarks? Well, I have those. Also, I have comics. I have art prints of comic book characters. I also have art prints of strange chibi characters, and if you like art prints of stuff just from my head, I have those too. Here's some button badges, here's a book about the graphic novel project I'm working on right now, and here are my comic books about something totally different based on a video game. So I don't feel necessarily like I have a niche at all. I guess thinking about it in terms of like making cartooning and drawing cartoons as a niche in comics, it's about as niche as I get. And I don't know that I found that niche so much as just sort of looked up and noticed I was in it. And that I kind of always have been. And I've circulated away from it at points, like for a while. I was like, oh, maybe I should pursue like illustrations for books. So I'll illustrate books instead, like just sort of do some isolated pieces and book covers and things like that. And then I just gradually keep coming back to making comics. I think there's something about the medium of comics that I really enjoy. I'm very much a storyteller, so that's like woven deep into the motivation for most of the art projects, and any kind of creative project that I do is trying to tell some kind of story. And I happen to be also a very visual person, and I really enjoy art. And so the natural kind of culmination of those things without really thinking about it is that I'm drawing comics. And I think particularly getting on the internet in whatever year, where I'm not really know how old I am, I found webcomics, and I didn't even know, like I've never been like a kid who read like syndicated comics in like newspapers and things in a big way. We didn't really have access to comics as kids. So we had like, I don't know if you will even know things like this, but we had a comic mag called The Beano in the UK, and it's just like a series. It's like an ensemble cast of like mini stories in a kind of a sort of monthly omnibus type thing. And so there's regular characters who would have these short stories, and then they'd all get lumped together, a little bit like a zine kind of vibe. And there's a couple of like mainstream kids comics publications like that growing up that were in the UK, but I didn't have a comic book shop near me at all. I don't think I set foot in a comic shop until I was about 13, maybe, and didn't have one close to me until I was in my 20s. So like getting on the internet and finding web comics, and anyone can publish them, and there are whole websites dedicated to hosting them for you. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this. And I think I tried and failed 3 or 4 different webcomic ideas. I got like maybe 3 comic strips into, and then just never went any further than that. And then I started doing a kind of slice of life comic based on just stupid stuff that mostly me and my cousin got up to, and that stuck. And so I did that for a few years, and I had that comic running on a mostly weekly basis for a few years. And I then wanted to sort of try and tell more longer form stories, and then that turns more into like comic books or graphic novel projects and stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of how I landed it where I am with that.
Yeah.
Is that question? I think that over answers that question.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really neat. And this has been something very cool for me with talking to you, is we kind of had similar motivations when it came to the comic side of it. But I definitely, as much as I love visual storytelling, I do not consider myself a storyteller. I didn't come up with elaborate stories on my own. Like, I had imagination and I had that, but I was always much happier to have someone else tell me a story or take from life and draw that. So again, I kind of got to the point where I tripped and fell into collaborating with people. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the finding a writer who has a story and isn't an artist. And now we work together on doing that. And I didn't realize that. Again, I understood comics. I'd been looking into comics, but I would look at web comics and like, man, they're coming up with this whole thing and they have this whole plan and it makes sense to them. I don't know how they're doing that. Yeah. So it's very cool and it's very neat. And I like the different motivations and kind of working through things and figuring it out. And the fact that it's okay to fail at some of your projects, and it doesn't mean they are any less valuable, just that it didn't work and you got to try something else
and move on.
Yep.
Some of it, I think as well, like I truly forget this, and I've literally just remembered it having talked about this now. Before I started doing comics, I was writing books, which sounds so pretentious, but the context of it is that in my mid to late teens, mid-teens onwards, really, I had decided that I couldn't do art. My art teacher had ruined it for me, and I had given up, and I was like, fine, I quit. But I still had these stories in my head that I wanted to tell. So I just wrote them out like novels, basically. And so I have like a few in first draft, I hasten to add, format that are just prose, like totally, like completely unillustrated, though I would try and doodle characters and things along the way because I never really give up. And so I did that, and I had that whole chapter, and then I went and got into filmmaking after that. And it's like, okay, so I can't draw, I'll have to write. Oh, I could make film. I don't have to draw that way either, because I can just pick up a camera. I can still tell my story, and I can tell it in a visual format. Film is the answer. And then I studied film, and I ran a film business for a while, and I was like, film is not the answer. But by that time, I had started kind of coming back to art and drawing, and I'd sort of reached a point where I was finally able to convey what was in my head in a drawing. And since I've been able to do that, I haven't looked back. So I guess that's what I wanted to do all along.
But also, it was good that you were able to try out the different stuff. And I love it, because the perpetuating thing is I have stories to tell. And gosh darn it, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to tell them, how to get them out of my head. I'm going to do it. Oh, I love that. So out of all of those projects, all the different things that you worked on, what's one that you're really proud of?
I think I've got 2 ways to answer this question. The first being the thing that I like, the idea and the story that I'm the most proud of. Or the second way is the thing I finished. Because that is the present challenge of having so many different projects and stories. And those 2 things cannot be the same answer, because the project I'm most proud of isn't finished. So I would say the project I'm most proud of is, I think, the concept I'm the most proud of, which like when you come up with an idea and you're like, I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I think this is a good one. This is a good one. So I came up with that idea in 2015, and I have been working on it ever since, on and off. And it's a project that keeps getting stalled because I'm not happy with where my kind of art style is and where the quality of my art is. And so I'm like, no, I can't do it yet. I have to get better at art first. At some point, I'm going to have to just do it. But it is a project called Ivy in the Dark. I have an info page about it on my website, actually, and it features this character who I happen to have a convenient acrylic standee of. That is Ivy. And it is a story of the little girl Ivy who gets sacrificially or ritually sacrificed to the mountain gods by being lowered into a deep, dark cave beneath her village to be devoured by a great mountain beast. And it's a story about what she finds down there and the kind of adventure she goes on.
I love it.
And I've had it written for years, and I'm so pleased with the concept, and I've got some of it blocked out, and I'm just kind of keep coming back to it, and then like working on other stuff and then coming back to it. And I kind of feel like in the next couple of years, I really want to bring that one to fruition. If nothing else, so that I can tell people about it properly. But in terms of projects that I'm proud of that other people can actually see, I would say a toss-up between either the comic I'm working on right now, because I think it's that thing that every artist has, which is everything that they've done before, the thing they've most recently done is junk, and the thing they've most recently done is the best, which is my Dungeons and Dragoones comic book series, for which issue 1 is only just finished. Or I did a children's book called Duncan Potterly's Extensive Compendium of House Monsters, which started off as an Inktober project and turned into a children's book about a little boy chronicling monsters that he finds in his house. I put it on social media, like I planned it out, did it like a different monster every day of Inktober from 2019.
Time.
What is time? And everybody wanted it to be in a book, so I did a Kickstarter for it, which went really well, and it finally got printed, despite global pandemics kind of messing with some of those plans. And it seems to have had a really nice impact on people. Like, got lots of really nice feedback, and people telling me how much their kids liked it as well, which is great, because kids won't lie to you to spare your feelings.
No.
If a kid tells you that they like something, you're like, oh my god, it must be good. Because kids don't care if they hurt you. Deep wounds. They don't care.
No, they will be so brutally honest with you that it's kind of I won't ever challenge them. If they say they like it, I won't ask again like I do sometimes with adults. It's like, no, you said this. I'm going with it because you'll tell me.
My niece and nephew frequently look at things that my sister draws. They're like, it's not very good, is it? Little swine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
They're brutal.
Yeah. They're so brutal.
Yeah. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm proud of creating something for children that children actually liked, because I think it's really easy to create something that is child friendly that kids don't really care about.
100%.
So I'm pretty proud of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Yay. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, just thinking about the kids that I teach, and I'm just like, there's been times where I'll draw something up on the whiteboard. They're like, Miss Emily, that doesn't look right. I'm like, you're right. I know.
Sorry. I'll do better.
I'm so sorry. Oh, go home and cry. It's fine. It's fine, kids. I got this. They
won't remember either.
No.
You'll say something that just haunts you for the rest of your days, and they forget.
Yep.
In 10 minutes.
Yeah, they walked out the door. They've already forgotten. We'll come back the next week. I'm like, do you guys remember when we did this last week? They're like, no. I'm like, cool.
Well, I haven't been having like sleepless nights all week trying to resolve this thing. No, it's fine.
It's fine. Oh, gosh. Yeah, kids. So any artists out there, if you ever want real honest opinions, go talk to some middle schoolers or some elementary school students. They'll tell you straight up what they think.
Yes, they will.
Oh, it's too funny. So obviously you've worked in a bunch of different ways of creating art. What is a medium that you absolutely love?
I think digital artwork is such a broad medium, but I love it because it's so broad.
Yeah.
And that's definitely been my go-to, as I have kind of said, I guess. So I've done comic books and other artwork on paper in traditional medium using markers because I can't paint to save my life. And that was fine. The idea of being able to create something on paper that's colorful and artistic was something I couldn't do before I found comic markers. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll draw like this. And then I got like back into doing digital art, and I learned new tricks, and I sort of educated myself with that. And I'm like, oh no, this is better. This is more me, I think, because of the versatility of it. The versatility of it, and in more recent years, the portability of it. So I've got, back in England, admittedly, so already not convenient, but it sort of proves the point. I've got giant cases filled with comic markers that I would take to conventions, and like underarm and like pads filled with Bristol boards, and my pencil case full of pencils and all sorts of that stuff, and inking pens and just sort of like, there you go, ready to make some art. Yep. Or I can stuff my iPad in my bag and fly around the world, which I did, which is why I have my iPad here, and I don't have all my pro markers because they're incredibly bulky, and also they're very expensive individually, and they run out of ink, or I don't know, in a year and a half, if many of them have even dried up by this point, who knows? So there are limitations to that, and I think that the medium of digital works on so many different platforms in so many different ways and can mean so many different things depending on who it's in the hands of. And just the concept of that alone, although like I'm not the one doing many different things with it necessarily, but the possibilities just feels inspiring on its own.
Absolutely.
And also I have edit undo, which is
undo
brilliant.
Forever.
Because art is not exclusively, but a huge portion of art for me is not necessarily just means to an end, but very much in tandem with a story that I'm trying to tell. So for me, the sort of discipline of getting the art thing bang on perfect is less important than getting the art thing to read a certain way in order to convey a concept or a story point. And that's kind of where I sit with art. So I think there's a lot of ways where very traditional artists or specialist artists and illustrators would weep if they saw some of the methods I use to achieve the artwork that I produce. But for me, it's not necessarily being like, look at this thing that I crafted exclusively with the turn of my hand and the canvas. And it's like, no, I totally used the drawing tools built into the program that offered up the perspective, and I didn't have to figure anything out. It said, look, this is the horizon point, and that makes that line work like that. And I'm like, cool, then I can lock the line to that, even better, brilliant.
Yep.
Like, I'll do that. And like, oh, I don't have to figure out the opacity or the shade or the thing that I want, because I can change the color afterwards, and I can sort of make it iterative, because for me the purpose of it it's not the same motivation behind the way I think other people produce art for different purposes. I don't think that either's wrong or right. I just think that that's something that I categorically can't do in a traditional format or medium. So for me, that's my preference.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense to me, because I feel like that's the storytelling element of it, coming from animation, coming from comics. Like, even when I was looking at the schools that I was going to go to, I specifically didn't go to a fine art school because producing fine art and that type of brain space wasn't what I was looking for. It was a very different, and I hate to refer to it like this, even though it makes sense, in that kind of disposable art. But I say disposable art in the same way that like novels are. Novels in a series or anything like that, like they're meant to be consumed in a way. Doesn't mean you can't go back and enjoy them again, but that whole, as opposed to having just a single piece of art, a painting on a wall or a sculpture in a museum that you go and you take in, like this is meant to be interacted with and consumed and then possibly never seen again, and that's okay. And I think it's a very different mindset when it comes to that actual creation behind it.
Yeah, like a single panel of a comic is not the same thing as a 10-foot portrait that's going to sit in a gallery and have thousands of people just stand and stare at it.
Yeah.
And think about how it makes them feel. The story in a comic makes you feel something, but that panel on its own isn't necessarily going to. Some panels do. I'm not saying that they don't. But it's a very different thing. I have to do that a lot when I'm reading comics, and I have to sort of stop and really look at a panel and be like, if I stop and just look at this panel in isolation, like, oh, that's a really scribbly background. They haven't even actually drawn anything. They've just done a gradient of color. They don't have feet in this panel. They don't have feet in that panel. I don't see this character's feet in this entire comic. And it makes me feel a lot better.
No, I love that. So in talking about that, what is a medium that actually scares you or intimidates you?
I don't know if it's scare, like fear, or hatred. Paint. I can't paint. I've really tried. Like, this is going back to like the days with the horrible art teacher at school, where I really, really tried to listen to what she was saying and learn the techniques, because I've always wanted to paint.
Yeah.
I just can't. Like, wow, I can't paint. I think through doing digital art and learning the sort of artistic techniques that aren't applicable just to digital mediums, but like, so lighting techniques, understanding color theory, understanding how colors work and mix, and understanding just all of that has made me better at painting, but I still can't paint. So like, there have been great many really cool pencil sketches over the years that I've destroyed because I tried to paint them. I definitely had that moment at school where we had an exercise. We had to do a self-portrait, and I sketched it, and I was actually pretty happy with the sketch. And I went to the art teacher. I was like, please don't make me paint this. She's like, the exercise is to paint it. That's the point. I'm like, please though.
Please don't.
Please no. It's going to ruin it. And she's like, this is the exercise. And I'm like, but please don't. And I ruined it by painting it. But yeah, so I periodically come back. Like, I think a couple of years ago, I was like, I will buy a watercolor set. And I did. And I tried painting something. And it was terrible. And I haven't watercolored since. So I just can't do it. It's something about paint on a brush and water and the whole thing. Can't do it. I work with pastels. I can do pastels. I can do pencils. I can do markers.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Just can't do paint. I don't know why.
Yeah. It's so funny to me for someone who can be so gentle with my, like, okay, we just need to keep sketching. We need to keep practicing, going through all that. For some reason, then if I sit down and I paint something and it's not immediately good, I am so critical of it because I'm just like, no, you're terrible. Don't ever paint again. I was like, that's not the same. You literally don't do that with the other thing that you're already good at. Like, yeah, no, it's different.
This is paint.
It's different. It's paint. You should, yeah. No, and it was, watercolors took me a while, and I eased myself in with watercolor pencils because, much like you, like, pencils and markers made sense to me. Like, that I could control. That was something that my brain could connect with. So then as I started doing that and gently like adding water to that, of which I already had a controlled piece, that was really the only way. But even then, like, I sit down and I don't have nearly the same amount of confidence when I watercolor as when I just sit and sketch, or when I sketch digitally. Like, I'm doing it. I'm not always happy about it. Like, I don't feel good. Oh, yeah. Oh, paint. It's just, but I think I loved what you said about there being so many different outlets and facets and elements to digital art. And I think it's unfortunate because it is a newer medium that there is a lack of understanding about how diverse art is in traditional media. It really is that diverse in the digital platform, that there are so many ways you can utilize this technology to create different things, that it has such vast scope. Just like someone sculpting in marble, someone sculpting in glass, someone doing fiber work. Like it is just like that, even though it is only, produced in a digital way. Like,
I mean, I've done better painting on my computer than on paper. I think it's something to do with layers. Like my brain works in terms of art program layers now. And what I can't do is blend paint colors. So like if I was to just like paint everything block color and then let it dry, I think I quite instinctively, I do very block color things, like very bold colors. It's sort of how I work. I do a lot of cell shading in my digital work. I'm trying to kind of, in places at least, broaden that even in a digital capacity. But I can digitally paint because I can separate things on layers and I can be in super fine control of it. I think there's something about the chaos of fine art that you have to be able to embrace.
Yeah.
And I'd love to get there, but I'm definitely not there. But yeah, so I can create a watercolor looking piece on my iPad and it'll look like a watercolor. And people will be like, wow, did you paint that? And I'm like, technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
But I've drawn the early days of people starting to switch to, or at least me starting to switch to a pencil texture brush in an art program on Photoshop. And I started drawing something that looked like a pencil sketch. And I think I showed somebody or I shared it online or something. And someone was like, did you really draw that? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, no, but really, like with a pencil. I was like, I didn't any less draw it because it was on a computer instead of on paper. Like I still drew it.
I still had to do all the stuff.
It's a magic show where you've it's a deep fake. It's art deep fake.
Yeah. No, I found, and it's funny because I found that so much more once I got into like the professional working world. Like when I would be working on designs for clients and logos, they're like, well, yeah, we'll just put it in and have the computer do it. I'm like, what is it that you think that the computer is going to do? It's not like a finalize this art program. Like there's not that. Like I still have to clean it up. It's still my work. I'm just utilizing the fact that I can now make it in vector and I can make it really crisp and clean for you. That yes, it's being done on the computer, but it's not any less being done by me.
It's a tool. It's not a generator, which is becoming harder even to argue because now there are also literal generators on computers, but that's a different thing.
Yeah. Which, kind of with all the cartoon me things, it's kind of nice because I don't get asked to draw people for free as much anymore. So
there is that.
There's
Snapchat filling that demographic.
Yes. Thank you, Snapchat. Yeah, it's funny. And I think it has been interesting to watch people now that they have access to stuff like that. I have found at least a little bit, there is almost a little bit more appreciation then for something that is more hand created, even in a digital sense. They're like, okay, so I see what like just the generated stuff can do. But now I'm kind of seeing it's the appreciation for tattoo artists. Like, okay, you're not just picking like a stamp or a sticker to put on you. Like this is them working within that space and really incorporating it and making, you're taking the artist's part of it and incorporating that and making the art better. And I'm hopeful that part continues, that people will start to be able to see the differences. And gosh, I hope. Or the AI will just take over and they won't need us anymore.
Yeah. Someone's going to have to clean up the vectors still, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And for the number of people who don't know how to, save a transparent background, I think I'll probably always have a job.
Oh,
it's too real.
Far too real.
So with all the different ways that you've created art and moved through, what have you found helps you work through an art slump if you are in a slump?
So art slumps seem to be happening to me a lot in the past year or two, as I think is probably true of a lot of people, even like if not an art slump, some sort of motivation slump. I think something I've learned, or at least am trying to embrace in recent times as a first point in that instance, is to forgive myself for that. So like if I'm in an art slump and I'm needing to get a thing done and I'm not getting a thing done, or I feel like drawing but I don't feel like drawing, or I want to draw something and nothing looks right, so I want to throw my iPad across the room or something like that. I have to just sort of be like, hey, it's okay. It's okay if you don't draw today. It's okay if the thing you were going to get done this week you don't get done, because it's not life and death and the world's on fire, so it's okay.
Yes.
And then I work about trying to actually fix it. And I think sometimes it'll be a step away from the thing that feels like a wall that you can't get through. And I try drawing things that I know I'm good at drawing. So it's like an easy win.
Yeah.
So, or something that is silly and doesn't matter and is just for fun. So just to try and kind of re-inspire and re-inject the actual fun in drawing, so it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like something I have to do, even though I can't do it. And then it becomes this onerous task. It's like, okay, so take away the have to and make it something I want to do because it's fun and it's silly. So that's when I'll start scribbling stupid things. Usually comics of stuff. That's when I usually produce some sort of comic from. I have a slice of life comic that's just like a stream of consciousness, stupid thoughts I think of when I need to express myself in some way. I turn it into one of these comics. And sometimes as well, just completely walking away and like taking a step back, go for a walk outside, just refresh, change the scenery, or if you can even like move your workspace somewhere different so that you're not just stuck in the same place trying to expect a different result to come out of circumstances that aren't changing. Stuff like that, I guess. So I don't have like a singular tried and tested thing that resolves it. And the reality is that sometimes that's not enough and I have to just accept that it's not going to happen and take however long it takes, a few days or whatever, to sort of self-heal and be gentle with myself, and then kind of no pressure, just get back into it when I can.
Yeah. I think the ability to give yourself that grace, I think, extends to anything that you're in. Obviously very specific to us in the art field, but that really is something with any work that you're doing or any problems that you're going through, all of that, to be able to step back and tell yourself it's okay that we are failing right now, or that we might keep failing. And that's not an easy thing to do. And it can be very difficult to say it and believe it. But it really is so important. And I think this was something when we were talking about the fine art and the traditional art or the digital art, I think it's so funny that there is this very, like, not only carefree, but kind of scattered and chaotic idea about artists. But so many of us that I interact with are actually like these neurotic, like specific, like we're very detailed, like it has to be this, we have to do all of these things. Like there's a whole top to bottom process.
Understand, it's really important.
Yeah. And we're weird control freaks about this stuff. And it seems so counterintuitive to, they're like, oh, I just create art and the spirit flows through me. I was like, no, like I have this whole schedule and this is how I create art and this is how I do this. And it's funny because then I think as you are trying to keep the balance between, the wild run through the forest naked muse and the actual like making work on a deadline, I think if we let one overpower the other, I think we start to kind of get out of balance with that. And that can be when it's really, really hard to figure out. I'm like, okay, am I making art because I'm happy and because I want to, or am I only doing it because I'm on a deadline and now I have to? And it can really get in your brain. Is the
deadline making me miserable, or is doing art making me miserable?
Yeah.
That's a bad question. I've definitely had to ask myself more than once over the years, is art making me sad? Is art like ruining my life? Is my pursuit of this thing ruining my life? And I think that's the difference between me at 14 years old saying, yes, it is, I quit. Mm-hmm. And me now saying, calm down. It's okay. Step back. Just go, accept and realize that it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
At this point in my life, my livelihood doesn't depend on it. And even if it did, my livelihood is just money in my bank account. And I could go get another job if I just needed to do that without the pressure of that being hinging upon my creative work so that I could still live and afford the things I need. So it's not life and death, and it's okay. And the whole point of it is to do it because we love it. So find the love again somehow.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's applicable to a lot of different things. And I don't always get it right. I strive to forgive myself, but it's so hard to do.
It's really, really hard. And I think, at least for me, on times where I will put so much weight and so much pressure on myself for certain projects that if they were to fail, like, I can't always conceptualize in my brain how it will be okay afterwards if I fail at this thing. But it always is. And if I miss a deadline, or if I don't get on a project because my art wasn't good enough, or because I didn't make it in time, like, okay, it is okay. You still like it. You still keep doing it. You will still continue. There will be another project. There will be another thing. But in that moment, it feels it's so like tunnel. And I'm like, this is the only thing. This is the only thing I could do with my life. The only thing that will make me happy. And exactly what you said. I was like, no, if at some point I needed to stop, and I needed to stop for a couple of years, I could do that and reevaluate and try something else. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in the moment, it can be very hard to have that little voice on your shoulder being like, it's really okay.
I did, it's been, as I say, a big wrestling point in recent times. I did a short, sort of really loose, scribbly sort of autobiographical thing not that long ago of a version of me now talking to my younger self about the idea of like feeling like you can't do it and feeling like maybe it's time to give up or something. And the idea being that like, well, I know what happens if you give up because I did that. So now I'm going to try not giving up and see where that leads. Yeah. So no, I like that helps as well. Because like I've tried giving up and it didn't help, and I'm back here again anyway. So,
like, all right, we'll do something different this time. No, I really like that, and and I think it can be so scary and so daunting and overwhelming as a young person. Like when I came out of college and had a degree in art, and all of a sudden had no idea how I was going to create art. It felt like the end of everything because I didn't know what to do. And being a number of years removed from that now, while I still get overwhelmed, I never feel that same low point again, where I'm just like, nope. I'm like, okay, well, I don't have it all sorted, but I know I can do this and I know I can do this. So we're going to do that for a while. And while I'm doing that, something else might pop up and we're just going to go with it. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think different, keeping in mind, I've had a lot of like self-reflection in terms of like what success looks like as well. So it's easy to say like, I know what failure looks like. I know what feeling like I can't do it looks like. What does an art slump look like? What does an art block look like? Okay, well, what does success look like? Because when you're a child, you're like, success means riches and fame and I live in a mansion and people around the world read my work and, you know, I'm published in every bookshop and that's what success is, right? And then like you find out like, oh, as the year goes by, take comics, for example, people who are very successful in the comics industry still kind of just sort of get by, you know, and outside of that very niche community, no one knows who they are. And outside of the fan sort of community of people reading comics, nobody knows of their work and reads it. It's not mainstream, even though it's mainstream.
Yep.
So it's like managing your expectations for success. On the one hand, sounds like that's disappointing, the reality, but perhaps success looks like publishing something, which I've already done. Self-published, sure. But I have a thing printed.
You have a thing.
On my online store, people can buy it and people have, and people can pick it up. I got it at a local comic shop. You know, it's on a shelf in a shop. Mm-hmm. Well, then I can check that box. I did that. That's a thing. I succeeded. I created the thing. The thing is physically printed. It exists. It's real. It's finished. These are measurable forms of what success looks like. And if you want to make a living off of doing it, well, what does making a living off of doing art look like? Does it look like finding a way to create an arty opportunity? Or does it look like success, work doing this for a living only looks like I draw my comics and I draw exactly what I want, I'm full control, and I sell it and people buy enough of it that then I can pay my way? Or does it look like accepting that maybe, especially with the world being as stressful as it is right now, maybe you don't need to take on the pressure always of being entirely self-sufficient and support yourself through doing your own artwork? Like, if you can, great, go for it. But it's also okay to just do that for the passion and the fun of it, and then have a day job to facilitate doing that. And I kind of jump between those two things a lot of the time as well, and kind of remind myself that it's more important to me to be able to do the thing than to be able to do the thing for a living.
Yeah.
And that affords me a lot of breathing room as well, just that reminder.
No, that's tremendous, and I love it. And I think it's actually focusing on celebrating the success, and just like you said, it's not quantifying that it has to be a specific kind of success. If you know, if success for you is publishing something and you publish it, that is success, no matter what it means in the world out from there. You know, so maybe that means that then, okay, now that I've done it once, that means I can do it because I did it once. But taking that moment, because I don't think a lot of artists are good at celebrating ourselves and celebrating our successes. It's much, much easier to dwell on our failures. So yeah, I think being able to take those moments and not get so caught up, because usually by the time, you know, if we're getting something published, we're already on to the next project. So we're already in the okay, well, how am I failing now? You know, that thing's done, even though it's done and it's published and it's just like you said, it's finished, it's a printed thing. You're already so moved past it. So yeah,
it's so real. Yeah. But yeah, I guess like it doesn't feel quite so much like a failure if the gap between where you're at and what success looks like isn't as astronomical as you make it. You don't have to put the success point out there. There's a chap from the UK, Matt Garvey, who's just recently started a Making Comics YouTube series. He's a comic writer on the sort of UK circuit. He's kind of one of the community there. And I've been watching a few of his videos, and he talked about the idea of the difference between a goal and a dream. And that maybe the dream is to work for Marvel or DC or some of the big publishers, or maybe the dream is to do whatever, sort of the pipe dream thing. But the goal is to do it at all, or to set something much more manageable and a very measurable and realistic form of what success looks like. And then you can start to sort of do that bit by bit. And then you realize, like, oh, if the goal is to publish, well, actually, with today's technologies and services available, anyone can publish. Anyone can publish themselves. And all you need to do is to just pay the money to have it printed and published. And maybe you just have to fork out $50 and you've got a table at your local convention, and suddenly you're a professional artist selling the thing that you published. And it's that easy.
Yeah.
That easy.
Yeah.
But in theory, like it's not this unattainable thing. It's this thing that anyone can do. Yeah.
And I know for me, literally having someone push me to get that first table when I was like, but I'm not anybody. Like, I don't have anything. I don't know. They're like, no, you're going to sit at this table and you're going to sell this book that we made. I'm like, okay. And then I did it. I did it once and I learned, and then I did it again. And I sold some of my books, and people walked away having paid me money for art that I made.
Yeah.
And then I got to do it again. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can do this. And my brain can't tell me that we can't do it anymore, because we've physically done it. We sat there and we did it for an entire weekend. No matter how that turned out, we did it. So there's no way to backtrack that, because you had the experience.
Yeah. And if you don't have a comic made, you can still go there and just sell prints.
Yep.
You could just sell one print if that's all you have. You could just focus on that print and sell it if you want. So like suddenly Art Slump, the mountain of things that you're supposed to be achieving with your life, it's like, okay, draw one picture. And that's all you have to do.
Yep.
That's a much more manageable thing. And so I think sometimes, as well as finding the fun and inspiration and getting excited and sort of like shaking off the pressure is a big part of it as well. Like not feeling like you've got this impossible mountain to climb. Artists do like to put a lot of pressure on ourselves, don't we? We're like, oh, I've got to do this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this. You know, if I'm not successfully running my own independent small press empire by the time I'm 23, then really I'm a failure.
And why would I even do it if I... Yeah. And I think, so I'm going to be completely selfish in this segue. It is something that I have come to so appreciate about getting to do Doodle Crew, is because not only it forces me to do art every day that we sign up and we have a date where we're going to do art. I have to be there. I have to show up. I have to draw, even if I'm in a slump, even if I'm having a bad art day. I said I'd be there and I'm going to be there. But it also is, it is that creative freedom and that comfort in being around people who are, as you and I have now talked a bunch of times, having similar experiences. We're having similar struggles. We're having similar, fights with our brain, and to just get to sit there and create art with people and have it, I don't want to say not matter, but not matter. What I make on Doodle Crew doesn't matter. I have used it then for all this other cool stuff, which I love. But if it didn't, it would be okay. Because for 3 hours, I just sat and I got to hang out with my art friends.
That's really great. Like having that community of people and having a space, whether you invite new people like myself, which I thoroughly appreciated, or whether you just sit around with the same group of people. There's just like a constant and infinite source of, I guess what I'm trying, mood collaboration is the only phrase I can think of, where you're not working together to create a project, but you're definitely working together in a kind of social setting, and it's beneficial. It's really good for everybody, and it's like, aside from like swapping tips and really learning something, just that sort of session of collective art sharing has got really kind of healing and beneficial qualities to it. It's really, really nice. Like I've got to say, like, even I was pretty nervous before doing the session on Saturday, and right before we started, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to draw. I sort of got inside my own head a bit. I was like, what am I even going to draw? What if it's terrible? Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. I'm going to suck. Maybe I should bow out, like doing the proper millennial thing of being like, I know I agreed to this when I was in a really good mood, but I regret my choices. No, I set myself up for failure. Like, it was so nice and relaxed and just like, all right, we just set going and hung out, and it's like, and go. And it doesn't matter. And we're kind of chit-chatting as we go, and you just draw what you draw, and after a while you kind of get lost in what you're doing and not thinking about the fact that this is an art exercise for a podcast.
Yeah.
But no, it's just drawing for the fun of drawing with other people who get it.
Yep.
And actually, like, not only was it just a really great session, I really surprised myself. Like, I really thought I was going to draw like garbage. I was like, oh, I did all right. I did okay. Yeah. And that's, it's really hard to articulate the value of that because artists are so hard on themselves, and because for so much of the time, for my experience at least, art is so solitary, and it can be very solitary. You're just working by yourself all the time. So something like the Doodle Crew has been great. Also, I love the word doodle. I've always used the word doodle because I had trouble, I think, using the word artist. Like, I wouldn't allow it. I wouldn't let myself do it. So everything's a doodle. Oh, it's just a doodle. It's like 20 hours of work.
Again, my whole finished comic book that's printed. It was like, it's just some of my doodle.
Some doodling. Yeah, it's my masterpiece. But so it's super awesome. I'm very grateful for you inviting me on. Bless Mike for introducing.
Yeah. No, that was a wonderful kismet. Just and it's fun for me to, again, selfishly, like, I get to interact with all of these incredibly talented people who draw in different styles. And even if, like, as we've talked, most of us are all working digitally, none of our art looks the same. And we bounce ideas off of each other. And something I've realized that I also love with the interactive chat element of it too is it's like sitting in the equivalent of a writer's room where we're just throwing ideas around. And off of the point of being so solitary, I am not only responsible for the ideas now. Like, I can kind of sit back and just absorb the creative energy and absorb the funny things that chat are saying and incorporate that in, or not, or save it for later. And it's that it almost is just like a breath where I'm just like, oh, I can just kind of not mindlessly create art, but kind of mindlessly create art because I'm not so like, okay, well, I've got to figure this out. I've got to figure this out. I'm like, no, even in a regular stream, like there's like, they said brain, so I drew a brain.
Set it adrift and it picks up momentum and everybody's joining in and suddenly it's a whole thing and it's a collaborative, creative, fun time. It's playtime.
Yeah, it is playtime. Yeah, no, I am so glad. I'm so happy you joined us. I can't wait to have you on again. And yeah, it's been awesome getting to know another artist and have such a great connection. Yes. Yeah. So if people want to see more of your amazing stuff, where can people find you, follow you, support you, all the things to see your awesome stuff?
Oh, I've got a very long list. The easiest sort of 2 points are you can find me across most of the internet at IddStar, with the exception of TikTok, where it's at Vic IddStar because someone else got in there first. Furious. Or you can go to iddstar.com, which is my website, which has got links to everything else, including I have an online store, which is linked off of that on Gumroad. I have a Patreon, also linked off of that, and is also /IddStar. And I have links to various comics, including my fantasy comic series of Dungeons and Dragoones, my queer webcomic Activist Haircut, my stupid slice of life comic Flightless Birds, if you want dumb jokes about penguins, and information about the Ivy in the Dark graphic novel project that I've been working on for an eternity.
Yes.
All of that is all there. iddstar.com, if you get stuck, is the thing to remember.
Awesome. That's awesome. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for sitting down and chatting art with me. I have enjoyed it literally every time we've done it. So
yeah, I'm super, super glad that Mike introduced us. It's been super nice to meet you and to get to know everybody in the community and the Discord and everything. So thank you so much for inviting me to join.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Goodbye.